What is democracy?
It's got something to do with young men killing each other, I believe.
In Auschwitz, there was a job worse than dying. The Nazis took Jewish prisoners and forced them to work the gas chambers. These men walked the new arrivals in, and when it was over, they cleared out the bodies and burned them. They were called the Sonderkommando, and for doing this job, they got to live a few months longer than everyone else. By October of 1944, they were secretly planning an uprising, and right in the middle of that, they found something in the gas chamber that shouldn't have been possible. A teenage girl under a pile of bodies, and she was still breathing. The gas hadn't killed her. So now these men had one single person they might be able to pull back out, and they had to figure out what to do with her while the uprising was already in motion. That's the story Tim Blake Nelson put on screen in 2001, and the movie flopped. Reviews were all over the place, and part of that is the casting. You've got David Arquette, Steve Buscemi, and Harvey Keitel walking around Auschwitz sounding like regular American guys. No accents at all. It pulled me out of the movie more than once. But where Nelson gets it exactly right is the situation itself. He built a story with no way out. There's no version of this where anyone comes out clean. It's one of the toughest American films of its entire decade. A Czech director spent 11 years getting this movie made, and when it finally premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2019, people stood up and walked out of the theater. Those walkouts are now part of the movie's reputation. The story follows a young Jewish boy crossing the Eastern European countryside during World War II. His aunt dies, and after that he has no one. He just gets passed from one stranger's household to the next. The film runs almost 3 hours, and it's split into chapters. And chapter after chapter, you keep hoping the next person will finally be kind to him. So you watch the horrors that happen to this boy, and on top of that, there's violence toward other people and toward animals that's just disturbing. I completely get why some folks headed for the doors. This is one of the most disturbing war movies of this century without question. Those walkouts weren't just some joke. In 1966, a Japanese director made a war movie set in the place war movies usually skip, the hospital. It follows a nurse through the Japanese campaign in China in 1939. She starts out at a hospital far behind the lines, then gets sent forward to a surgical unit near the front where the doctors have basically one treatment left to offer: amputation. And her one escape from all of it is a relationship with one of the surgeons, a man who spends all day amputating and who's addicted to morphine. Now, this movie is not here because it's the goriest. Plenty of movies show worse. It's here because it's disturbing. It gets under your skin. There's sex in it, and it sits directly next to the amputations, and they play the whole thing completely calm. And then it ends on one last shot that's just devastating. It's famous for a reason, and I'm not spoiling it here. This one tells you the ending in the first minute. A narrator comes on before anything has really happened and says flat out that the people you're looking at are living their final hours. Nobody's getting out. And then the film makes you spend the rest of it with them anyway. The story is set in 1944, in the last days of the Warsaw Uprising. The Polish resistance had risen up against the German occupation, and by the time this movie starts, the whole thing was collapsing. So a company of resistance fighters comes up with a plan. They'll go down into the city sewers and travel underneath Warsaw, hoping to come out in the city center, but down there everything falls apart. It's pitch black. They can't read any directions, so they have no idea which way they're going, and the tunnels turn into a maze with no exit. The first half of the movie plays out above ground, and that part is already punishing, but the second half is the reason it's here. These people wander in circles until they break, and then they die slowly in the dark. If you're even slightly claustrophobic, you'll be thinking about this one for a week. During the Second World War, the Imperial Japanese Army ran a biological warfare division called Unit 731, and it experimented on human beings. Decades later, a director named Mo Tun-Fei made this film about it. On paper, the story follows a group of teenage cadets assigned to the facility. In reality, the movie barely cares about them. What it actually cares about is recreating the real experiments one after another as precisely as it can. It walks you through people being taken through every stage of frostbite, deaths inside a pressure chamber, and a vivisection performed on a living human being. And I'll give this the one thing it's owed. That precision is real. As a document of what was actually done in there, it carries some weight, and that's about the only artistic defense I can make for it. Because there's another problem. The production itself used some questionable methods chasing that authenticity, and once you know that, the whole thing gets even harder to stomach. And it was already stomach-churning to begin with. So, yes or no? This is my no. It's definitely one of the most disturbing war movies ever made. But belonging on some list and being worth your time are two different things. Most people should skip this one, and I mean that. This one wasn't made for theaters at all. In 1984, the BBC made this as a TV movie and broadcast it straight into people's living rooms right at the height of Cold War paranoia. Ordinary families sat down in front of the television and got served the most accurate depiction of nuclear war anyone has ever filmed. And the movie knows exactly how to get you because it starts small. You're watching a couple deal with an unplanned pregnancy, and for a while it plays like a relationship drama. But the news in the background keeps getting worse. You've got NATO on one side and the Warsaw Pact on the other, and they keep escalating until the bombs actually fall. The director here sat down with scientists and civil defense planners and asked what would really happen to a city. Then he filmed the answer, step by step. You get the blast, then the firestorm, then the radiation sickness, then the hospitals giving out because they just can't handle all the dying people, and then nuclear winter. And it keeps going, years into the future. The last shot is a freeze frame. I won't spoil it, but it might be the most despairing image ever put on a television screen. In 1959, 14 years after the surrender, there was still one subject in Japan that nobody would go near: what actually happened to their own soldiers at the end of the war in the Pacific. This movie finally showed it. It follows a private named Tamura stuck on a Philippine island in late 1944 when the war was already lost. Tamura has tuberculosis. His unit doesn't want him, so they send him to the field hospital. The hospital won't take him either, so he gets told, basically as an order, just go off somewhere and die. And that's the movie. It just follows this dying man across a ravaged island while the Japanese army falls apart around him. There's no real army left at this point, just these feral little groups of starving men who fight each other over whatever scraps they still have, and when those scraps are gone, they resort to eating each other, literally. Dalton Trumbo wrote Johnny Got His Gun as a novel back in 1938, and people have called it one of the most disturbing books ever written pretty much ever since. So when it finally became a movie 33 years later, Trumbo didn't sell it off and hope for the best. He wrote the screenplay himself, and then he directed the movie himself because he wanted to make sure nothing from that book got lost on the way to the screen. The story is about an American soldier who takes an artillery shell in the last days of World War I, and he survives it, which sounds like good news until you hear the rest. He comes out of it with no arms, no legs, and no face. He can't see, he can't hear, and he can't speak, and the doctors keeping him alive figure out that he's still conscious. There's still a whole person locked inside there, and the movie traps you in there with him. That's the most disturbing thing to even think about. The last one is German, and it's based on a true story. It's April 1945. The war has weeks left in it, and a 19-year-old German private named Willi Harold is running through the countryside. He's hunted by his own army because he's a deserter, and the German army was still executing deserters. He finds an abandoned staff car and inside it an officer's uniform. He puts it on because he's freezing. That's it, just some stupid accident. But the next soldier who runs into him takes one look at that uniform and treats him like a commissioned officer. And I have to warn you, the first stretch of this movie is funny. It plays almost like a comedy, a scared kid bluffing his way out of one tight spot after another, and you're rooting for him the entire time. You want him to get away with it. And then somewhere along the way, Harold stops pretending. He grows into the rank he stole. He talks his way into command of a camp where they execute deserters, which is exactly what he is. And he ends up presiding over those executions himself. And he's not just going along with it to keep his cover. You can watch him savoring every bit of that power. That's a pretty messed up thing to watch.